When Spider-Man No Way Home went to theaters last year, I made an episode taking famous video game characters and turning them into Spider-Man villains. Now, Spider-Man No Way Home is in theaters once again, with more fun stuff added to it, so I figured that made for a good excuse to add some more fun stuff to this series, and add some more villains to Spider-Man's big, fantastic, weird roster of baddies. Let's get into it, shall we? Let's go! Hit like, if you want, subscribe, if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show. Red had always had anger issues. Since he was a kid, everything seemed to make him mad far more easily than the average person. His easily stirred rage led him to getting into fights in school with other students regularly, and even sometimes with teachers. He was in and out of juvie for much of his young life and never properly finished high school, as he eventually got kicked out of every school he went to. He was sent to a military academy for a year, but even they weren't able to get him under control. He eventually stopped trying to get back into schooling and started taking on any low-level crime jobs he could in Brooklyn and Queens to make ends meet. He met a young woman, got an apartment with her, and kept up his work, but eventually got pinched by one of the many pesky spiders running around New York. He got a few months in jail, then got out, went back to it, and was eventually taken down again. But this time, in one of the early prison visits from his gal, she told him that she was pregnant. Red got out a few more months later and soon after had a baby girl to take care of, which would become that much more difficult when his girlfriend up and left him out of the blue one night, only leaving a note saying that his anger had become too much for her. Red was in trouble. He couldn't get a real job with his criminal record, so he had to keep doing illegal work to afford to raise his daughter. But if he got sent away again, she'd end up in the foster system and he might never see her again. Luckily, or unfortunately, he soon was given an opportunity to become a harder man to put away. A disgraced genetics doctor named Hoagland was always on the lookout for new test subjects for his many illegal experiments, and he had an eye on the criminal circles Red ran in for his next subject. He approached Red and offered him a year's worth of rent in cash, as well as promised him, if the experiment he'd undergo went well, no pesky spider would be able to get him behind bars again. Red really had no choice but to agree, and before he knew it, he was strapped to a table with a whole array of needles sticking out of his arms, legs, and neck. When the experiment began, Red felt like fire was being pumped through his veins. But it only lasted for a moment, as he was soon distracted from the agony by the confusion of seeing red feathers starting to spring up all across his body. His muscles got larger as well, and his feet morphed into bird-like talons. But just as the experiment was finishing, the wall next to Red exploded open. In stomped 3 other beings that all looked like they'd gone through the same transformation as Red, and they were not happy. The group tried to attack Dr. Hoagland, but he fled before they could get him. The group then unstrapped Red and told him that Hoagland had done his experiments on all of them, but then threatened to call S.H.I.E.L.D., claiming them to be dangerous, illegal, enhanced individuals unless they worked for him from then on. Hoagland had even threatened all their families when they refused. As you might expect, that made Red really mad. The group all agreed to work together to hunt down and kill Hoagland so he couldn't conduct his experiments on any more unsuspecting people. All the while, they'd help protect each other's families and continue their criminal careers, with some heavy-duty backup. Despite all having bird-like appearances after the experiments, none of them could actually fly, but they each had extremely enhanced durability and major leg power, so they could leap at their foes or at objects and smash right through them like human wrecking balls. This never made them the most renowned group of super crooks in New York, but it certainly put them at odds with Spider-Man and other local heroes on many occasions. Even still, Red was managing to stay out of prison, had found a suitable outlet for his rage, and, most importantly, was keeping his daughter safe. Heroes and villains alike mess with time travel far too often, and much of the time they don't realize the full ramifications of it. In the Avengers' last rumble with Kang the Conqueror, well, they did defeat him. They unknowingly set off a time-tearing eruption that pulled people from the distant past and future, and even potential futures, into the modern day. One of these was a girl from the far-flung future who people would come to know as Ling. She was massively confused by appearing in New York City, as the last thing she knew, she'd been on trial for war crimes, in battle for surface supremacy between her people and the treacherous Octarians. That event, of course, was something that wouldn't occur for thousands of years, in a potential future where humanity had died off, and a new species of squid human-enhanced hybrids became the dominant species on Earth. Ling, of course, couldn't communicate this to anyone because she didn't speak our modern English, so while wandering New York in the futuristic handcuffs that had been on her during her trial, she was eventually approached by agents from the Department of Damage Control, and couldn't respond to any of their questions, including, "What's with the handcuffs?" Worse still, it started to rain not long after they approached her. Rain burned the skin of Ling's kind, so as soon as she felt it, she started to run. The agents chased her, but she was incredibly fast and agile, springing over cars and even running along walls before ducking into an alley to get away. It was an impressive display that just so happened to be spotted by a man named Jackson Bryce, who more often went by Montana. He managed to track down Ling and show her that he meant her no harm, even helped her stay dry when he noticed how the rain was hurting her. He brought her to his safe house, where the rest of his crew, the Enforcers, were hanging out waiting for their next job. See, the Enforcers were career criminals who often did work for Wilson Fisk, and they were a tough group, but didn't have much in the way of enhancements. So they often found themselves just becoming punching bags for Spiderman, Daredevil, really whatever pesky do-gooder was watching Fisk's moves. They'd been on the lookout for some new super muscle to join their ranks, and Montana thought Ling might make a good addition. She didn't fully learn our language, but they taught each other enough to get by. Ling was able to develop, in the modern day, some tech she'd had in the future that aided her people, and every new gadget made Montana that much happier he'd found Ling. She created ink-shooting wrist gauntlets that sprayed a substance that she could literally swim through if it was splattered onto a wall or surface. She could even shoot condensed streams of it like a rope and fling herself through the air, much like a certain wall crawler. Ling was a bit of an odd one out in this crew, but she became a highly valued member, and eventually became ecstatic that she'd been displaced from her time. She was ready to splatter her name all over this time period as New York's latest villain. Asuri Valkar had always been fascinated by ancient cultures. Since super beings were such a common part of daily life now, she imagined that many of the stories and myths long thought to be legend must actually have been true in their time. Greek myths, Norse myths had all proven to have many elements of truth, so why not other cultures' mythologies? She was particularly interested in smaller, less well-known regions and their deities and tales, and one she spent much of her university years looking into was a lost culture from her homeland of India, a culture that lived along the rivers of the forests of Punjab. The little literature that existed on this community stated that they had a tiger deity that protected them, and whose power could be granted to an individual of the village to help guard them further still. Asuri was a massive fan of tigers, lions, and really any large cat, so this particularly drew her attention. Being prone to seeking adventure, Asuri set off to find the ancient ruins of this tribe. Her journey took her months of searching through the Indian forests, but eventually, buried in an underground cavern, she found the remains of the Tiger's Temple. There, she used all the knowledge and writings she had, along with inscriptions on the cavern walls, to try and summon the Tiger Protector, to prove these myths true. And soon, she achieved just that. The walls of the cave rumbled, and blue light emitted from them and shot right into Asuri. The power of the tiger god surged through her body and transformed her into a powerful tiger-human hybrid. She was ecstatic. She tore through the forests, leaping from trees, able to see easily in the dark, and every step she took made her want to test her new might more and more. It felt as though her adventurous side had been ripped right to her surface in this transformation. But soon, just leaping through forests wasn't enough for her. She wanted to test her might further. She wanted to pick a fight, whether it was the call of the tiger within her or just Asuri letting out her true self. She wanted the thrill of a brawl, of besting a powerful foe. She wasn't fight-hungry enough to attack a hero, of course, so she thought of what villain in the public eye might be a good trial for her new strength. One particular villain came to mind, one who regularly wore the flesh of one of her favorite animals, the lion, proudly displaying that he'd slain the beautiful creature. Kraven the Hunter. She had to stow away in a boat to get to New York, as she'd have to register as an enhanced individual before getting on a plane again, but once there, it didn't take her long with her newly enhanced senses to track down the Hunter. Their brawl quickly became a public display, with the two going blow for blow. Even while only being a newly empowered individual, Asuri held her own incredibly well and eventually got the Hunter to his knees. At this point in the fight, Spider-Man had actually been watching from the sidelines, enjoying seeing someone best Kraven. But when Asuri bared her fangs and lunged for his throat, the wall crawler jumped into action. He was all for Kraven being taken down, but not killed. Upon being pulled back from her target, Asuri immediately attacked the spider. Her fighting instinct was not going to allow her to hold back, and beyond that, she didn't think a man who'd killed as many innocent people and animals as Kraven had deserved to live anyhow. The battle ended in Asuri having to flee as the authorities opened fire on her and the spider, but she swore to finish her mission and put an end to the Hunter, even if it meant going through Spider-Man to do so. Alistair Smythe had spent much of his life trying to live up to his father's legacy. Spencer Smythe had been a genius robotics expert who'd even been commissioned by J. Jonah Jameson to create the first ever Spider Slayer to try and kill New York's favorite web slinger. His father had failed and died in the process, and Alistair ever since had been trying to complete his father's dying task, to kill Spider-Man. But at every turn, the spider managed to slay the Slayers. Alistair needed to go beyond anything he'd created before. He needed to create an artificial intelligent robot so advanced it was practically human, one that could even pass for human, so it could blend into crowds and catch the spider off guard. Smythe also knew that the spider was unwilling to kill, so if he made it convincingly human enough, the spider would likely pull his punches and be that much more likely to fall. His first attempt in this regard was a project he called Proto. This got him close to his goal, as Proto had a wide array of weaponry, but also could pass for human. But he malfunctioned in multiple trials, and Smythe put Proto into storage for future upgrades and started from scratch, using what he'd learned from making Proto. Smythe then made 2 more bots, with all the upgrades and fixes he knew he needed to add. These 2 were simply referred to in trials as Rock and Roll. One appeared to be a young woman, and the other a young man. Both came together as Smythe intended, but he eventually found Rock to be the more suitable creation to add his full arsenal of weaponry to. Rock's arms could be converted from hands into cannons, blades, flamethrowers, all with room for future upgrades. Rock was also well armored, but could project a cloaking field that made him look as though he was wearing regular clothing, and even change the appearance of his face to better slip away into crowds, if the need arose. And Rock's AI was so advanced, he could completely pass for a conscious human, someone Spider-Man would certainly not think of smashing as he had Alistair's past slayers. Truly, Smythe had finally made the ultimate Spider Slayer. But all the while this new Mega Slayer was being made, Proto was still watching and listening from storage. Proto may have had glitches, but he too felt that he was indeed a real sentient being capable of achieving his task, and he was saddened by being put to the side by Smythe. Proto eventually fled the facility and went to try and prove himself by killing Spider-Man before Rock could be sent out. He found the spider and made his move, but the combination of his glitches and Spider-Man's spider sense meant that the wall crawler was fairly easily able to take down the bot, and now essentially had warning of what was to come from the more advanced Rock. Smythe was livid with Proto, but sent Rock after Spider-Man all the same. Rock of course failed to kill Spider-Man, but was able to retreat and regroup, even upgrading himself due to his incredible intelligence. Spider-Man managed to get Smythe locked away in Rikers Island, but Rock was still out there, programmed to hunt down the Spider, and ever enhancing his abilities for the day he was finally able to achieve his goal. I honestly kind of forgot how much I love doing Spider-Man stuff. The combination of this video and the video that I put out on Friday of Spider-Man and Batman characters combined together really reminded me how much I love working with the Wallcrawler and his villains. Which, by the way, if you're new to the channel, you might want to go check out that series, or maybe my DC partner series to this one, famous cartoon characters if they were on the Suicide Squad. This was almost going to be a Suicide Squad episode, but since Spider-Man was back in theaters, I went that route instead. I'd love more suggestions for famous video game characters I could use in this series, or put them on the Suicide Squad, or whatever. Also want to let people know there is a bonus episode coming out on Wednesday. A bonus episode with the quality of a not bonus episode. So get excited for that, but besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is a quote from Vincent van Gogh. "Great things are done by a series of small things brought together." Any massive thing you want to achieve can seem daunting if you look at all the different steps at once, but if you just start taking the small steps, they will really add up to something fantastic. I hope that's inspiring to someone out there. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next episode on Wednesday. Goodbye.